Hello and welcome to the recording session for episode 212. That's right.
Yeah.
Anyway, Jake's trying to gaslight me. Isn't that right,
Whoa.
Jake?
Yes, that is true. I am trying to gaslight you.
Okay, well, I no longer feel gaslit because you've admitted to it. But then again, is this part of the gaslighting? You're trying to normalize what you've done?
If a gaslighter admits they're gaslighting, are they truly a gaslighter?
We could switch to electric. Switch to electric?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did my dad enter this conversation?
Boogie, woogie, woogie.
Your dad's Rudy Giuliani?
Whoa. Wires got crossed.
I missed a wire there. Yeah, for sure.
All I know is I'm going to do the Four Seasons run in Philadelphia where we run from the Four Seasons Hotel to the lesser known Four Seasons Hotel to the greater known Four Seasons landscaping.
Right.
I feel like how Frost Nixon was the Academy Award winning film after Nixon's resignation.
There's going to be.
There's going to be like a Tony Award winning play in 2030 that's just going to be called Four Seasons Total Landscaping.
Oh, total. I forgot the word total. Joke's ruined. Anyway.
Okay. We can edit it out.
Not in this video.
No, all our mistakes get caught for the Patreon people.
You see everything.
And then someday, the world.
Someday.
Oh, yeah, that's true. The whole world is true.
Jake wants to keep us.
Just listen to the podcast.
You, Patreon.
Just download the podcast. That's all I
We have something special.
Aww.
But we can share it with the world.
Something special that we can share with the world. I enjoy this so much.
Yeah.
I never really look at it as work. Like sometimes when I'm like putting it in my schedule, I'm like, oh yeah, I got to watch that episode. And then every time I sit down, I'm like, oh wait, my work is watching an episode of Star Trek.
Right? It's
Life
nice to have
so
little...
hard.
Right?
I know, what a whiner I am.
No.
Yeah, I wrote that in my journal.
I'm grateful for Jake being such a whiner.
That's the entirety of the entry for November 10th.
That's the only entry for the entire year.
Boy, she didn't get far in this journal.
There's some
Your kids are opening this up.
Event.
Your kids are opening this up years after your death. They're like, "Who's this?"
He was such a whiner, though.
She really defined her life around this guy's attitude. Apparently, he was a gaslighter, but admitted it. I don't know what that means. Did they have gaslight back then, Mom?
Turn off the gaslight, Mother.
Well, I remember Grandma was always complaining about her lighting, so maybe.
So freaking true. Anyway, let's do a podcast about Star Trek.
Yeah, let's. But this wasn't even this was barely an episode of Star Trek about Star Trek.
Right.
This was such a weird one. The Royale. Like, I feel like this was a script that maybe in the pitch meeting they were going around the table and they were like, all right, what do you got, Roger? And Roger's like, oh no, I forgot we were supposed to pitch today. And he like looks down in his bag and he sees like he has a mystery novel. He's like, The Royale.
I can actually tell you why this episode was made. Okay, so Todd Matthews had a terminal disease, and his make-a-wish was for someone to turn his novel that only had 5 book sales in all of the contiguous United States, and he wanted that turned into a Star Trek episode, and his cousin, Gene Roddenberry, hated so.
Well, and you can really tell the love because they often trash how bad the novel is.
I was going to say, so in this
written.
theory, his dying wish involves him being mocked for 90% of the episode.
So his cousin was always kind of a bully.
Yeah, that's
that
true.
was also, it was in his gratitude journal. You could see it.
Anyway, that's the truth. Put it in Memory Alpha. You're welcome.
Well, speaking of diaries and weird stories, it's The Royale, where the Enterprise investigates the wreckage of a 21st century Earth spaceship orbiting a distant planet, and its appearance of a casino?
Look, people in space want to gamble too.
I was going to say that this is the classic Trek episode, but it's not a classic Trek episode. Like, this is pretty forgettable.
Yeah, it was
a trash episode.
Kind of
like Todd.
Yeah, because there was a good way to do this, and this was not it.
I shouldn't speak ill of the dead like that. I'm sorry, Todd.
Yeah, that was his deathbed.
Why? What could have made this better? Because that's what I like to do when we see the episodes we don't really like too much. That we don't really like too much is to like speculate about what we could have done to fix it. Do you have an idea?
Let's ask Rabin from a Lubbock Texan.
Yeah, that guy was the worst. But this was essentially a holodeck episode, but just off of the ship. So there are a lot of ways to make that better. We've seen it before, like the Gumshoe episodes with Picard, or the Sherlock episodes with Data and Geordi. Like, you can take something with this weird context and still tell a good story. And just by saying that the book is bad doesn't excuse you telling a bad story.
Look, we're trapped inside a bad story, so we can't help it this episode. Sorry. I did like that there was a clue to be found, and then they found it, and they read it, and they said, okay, let's do it. Bye.
Right.
Yeah, that was super.
You know what I liked? When they talked about proofs, mathematical proofs in the opening scene.
I wrote that down too.
I love proofs and I miss proofs. And even though this is geometry and not calculus, the day I took my very last calculus class, I went to a party and I got really drunk. And I found this guy who tutored math. And I was like, I'm never going to take another math class again. And I'm really upset about it. And Joey promised to give me tutoring in math, but I never followed up. So, Joey, if you're out there, I'd love to do some math tutoring. Miss Calculus.
The way you introed that story was like, I was expecting like, boy, this time in college when I got super drunk, and I was like, wait, this is a mathematical proof story that has intrigue?
Right.
It's a tutor you stood up.
I thought it was going to be like, oh, I went to my calculus class, blasted, and aced the test, and turns out I'm a mathematical genius when I have vodka.
Oh, well, that's true, but weed.
Oh.
Yeah. I aced everything in math. I'm really good at math. Everything I'm bad at that involves speaking and attention, the opposite is true when it comes to math.
All of the Magic the Gathering is suddenly clicking into place and making sense in my head.
The mana symbols just come together.
Yeah.
Fermat's last theorem is the little puzzle that Picard likes to do in his spare time. Is that what he says? It like helps him relax, is to think of a mathematical proof.
Yeah, some people do Sudoku.
He finds solving the equation stimulating, is what he said.
He's also into archaeology, so we're getting some facts about Picard.
He's smart.
New hobbies.
He just like throws proofs at the wall just for fun. He's like, man, I can't figure this out. Well, I'm gonna go do some advanced algebra. This is actually this episode was made in 89, I believe, and then it turns out that this theorem was unproven at its during the writing of this episode, but then in like 93 or 94 it was solved. So what I read on Memory Alpha is that a Deep Space Nine episode actually comes back and addresses this issue and mentions that there might be multiple answers for it. So yeah, a mathematician figured it out in the 90s.
Sick.
Well, I was wondering about this episode too, because there's the play proof, and I wondered if that had anything to do with it, because that was right about the time that it was getting Tony, I think, consideration.
It's so funny how theater kids we are, because I think all three of us thought of proof, which is our probably our most well, maybe Becca didn't, but since she's such a
math.
Theater
kids can make fun of the math kids.
Well, it's because proof is only two-person scenes for the most part. Really great for acting class.
Yeah, that exactly. I was just gonna say that. Katie and I did a competition in college where we did a proof scene, and I really was like, everybody's doing proof scene.
Yeah. Well, because then Meryl Streep did a movie.
I mean, it's been a couple. Have a couple people done that movie? Was it Meryl Streep?
I thought. Maybe not. No. Oh, don't.
It's like a young woman, isn't it? Isn't it like Kate Winslet?
You theater nerds.
I'm Googling it. Oh, I'm thinking of Doubt with Meryl Streep.
This is a very different film than Doubt. Also a one-word Tony Award winner, so maybe that's why. Also different from Hair. Also different from Grease.
Two of those are musicals, and I'm very fundamentally opposed to you bringing them up in the same breath.
I would love if most of this episode you just kept trying to compare it to Doubt.
Yeah.
Okay. So when the nun becomes a shut-in to solve her father's math equation.
And that's why the astronaut was also shut in his room. It made sense.
Oh my gosh, there's an astronaut in this episode. Hey, where do we even start with this episode?
Where do we start with this episode? Where we start doesn't end up where we end, right?
Not at all.
We start out in space and we found a debris of. Actually, we found out we're near a planet. The Klingons have detected some weird anomaly near the planet, and we're gonna go investigate. This planet has very harsh conditions. There's ammonia tornadoes. Is that what Geordi said?
Nasty.
Yeah, he did say nasty.
So adequately represented in a black void with a swirly yellow ceiling.
Yeah.
That's
and we discover a piece of space debris which we transport onto the ship, and dun dun dun, it's a 1980s NASA logo. Whoa.
How did it get to this remote corner of space? Americans in that time did not have the ability.
We learn later in the episode when we find the astronaut's lapel or his badge on his shoulder that it's from the 2030s or something like that.
I'll tell you exactly when it's from and why it's important. Okay, where in somewhere between the years of 2033 and 2079 AD, because there was 52 stars on the flag, and that's when DC and Puerto Rico get statehood, baby.
That's literally
we only got 13 more years to wait.
That's the exact same thing I wrote. I was like, Puerto Rico and DC.
That's so funny.
Which is 2033 is pretty close now, so that's actually not a bad prediction. I know it feels far for us.
This year.
Yeah, no, I agree. I know personally I want it to happen now, but this feels like it's pretty damn close. That's pretty amazing.
We could have a whole other Trump administration in that time. This is terrifying. And I think they're probably right because they have foretold the future before.
Mm-hmm. And
iPads.
The iPhone. The Apple Watch, yeah. Anyway.
Okay, well, so
sponsored by Apple this episode.
Yeah.
So we go down to we discover this debris is here, and after looking through the debris, we discover that there's a structure on the planet that we didn't notice before, and there's no reason for that structure to be there. We're not even really sure how it survives, but it's very dangerous down there in terms of the cold. It's actually, I think Geordi says it's negative 200 something degrees Celsius, which is below zero, and I didn't think there was an absolute zero, but it turns out there is. They're theoretically possible. So
it's on a plane of methane, which is, as far as my notes go, pig farts.
Well, it is an occurring gas outside of organisms.
Are you saying you have a series of notes that say methane is
my mental notes? Methane.
Oh, mental notes. Okay, good. So you didn't write that down and just put that on the wall somewhere. Okay, good. Methane is a gas that comes from a variety of sources. Amongst those, yes.
It feels like a textbook.
So
I'm trying to be gaslit again. What's happening
with methane?
So they decide that
too much ammonia cloud in the sensory deprivation chamber.
They decide that I guess the best option is to beam down. And that
Obviously.
Seems to be Picard's thing, or that seems to be Riker's thing where they're like, well, suggestions. Riker's like, well, we can go on an away team.
Stick me in it, bro. Stick me in it. I can go
Let me get in there.
Let me get in there.
Well, they're stuck on the ship all the time, and especially with Riker's personality, you can see that he wants to get out there and adventure.
Riker has two answers, which are either let's arm weapons or let's go down and investigate.
Mm-hmm.
Or fuck it.
Why not both?
Those are kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
You know what? I just realized Riker has incredible restraint in this episode. Not once did I think horny on main.
There was a time.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right. I didn't notice it either, Becca. I was like, yeah.
Or maybe not. It was more of I felt the competition between him and the gross Texas guy over. Yeah, it was just some weird macho thing going on, but it got weird.
Well, when you're from Lubbock, Texas, you just gotta grab some ass. Pay for the ladies' meal. You know what I mean?
Did he say you just gotta grab some ass? I missed
He
that.
did it.
He kept. She would make a face like something was
pinching her.
Yeah,
a pinching face.
Yeah, not cool. 10-gallon. Well, we beam down. It's a black void with a ceiling of methane, and there's a nice little revolving door in the middle of nowhere.
I feel like they charge for this room in LA.
Yeah, and I would do it.
Like it's a $70 for 20 minutes kind of thing.
Exactly. That's what I meant by sensory deprivation chamber.
Right.
Bougie women pay for this, and people. I'm sorry.
I mean, I think it's reflective of a low budget for this episode because, like, I think they were just like, okay, let's just make it black if we don't have the budget to make a set for the planet.
They got this casino set.
And like it still feels like a TV casino set. Unfortunately, it doesn't have like a huge amount of depth to it, but like they did a pretty good job of at least populating it for the most part. These TV shows that are crowded parties always feel a little forced, unfortunately.
And I will say that they did fill it with those extras, but the dealers that they got were the most lackluster people. They're like a 7. Oh, we gotta go again. So, like, come on!
It's not a very lively place.
I don't know. Have you ever sat at a table in a casino in Vegas? Because that's how the dealers are.
That's true. Yeah.
And there's just this sort of like mechanical, because you can't show any preference for one player over another. You have to be very impartial. And wow, they got quick fingers. Let me tell you. Maybe they got real dealers.
They could have.
Yeah.
The one actually they probably did when they were hiring for extras. They probably say have dealer experience, and then so I mean it's easier. It's a bit bigger skill to be a dealer than it is to be an extra. So they were probably dealers who weren't extras, so they probably weren't knowing to act. But like,
right,
I worked in a casino briefly out of college. I worked in the cage, and so like I got to see.
What is the cage?
It's where the money and the chips get exchanged, like the cashier.
Oh. I thought that was the name of the casino.
No, I was in the cage in the corner dancing.
Yeah, that's what I pictured. Taking photo boots.
The energy of a casino is about right with what they are because it is a depressing place, especially card rooms like that, because people generally lose their money, right? Also, in terms of like dealers showing preference, one thing I learned there is the dealers are always gunning for the players to win against the house because guess how they make tips? When the players win.
Yep.
So they're always wanting the players to win. But like in a game where the dealer is impartial against people who are playing against each other, that's definitely true for sure.
Yeah, I sat at a game of Pai Gow, which is like baby poker, for a couple hours spending my friend's money because he was like, "Hey, yeah, you go. Here's my chips. Don't lose them all." Spoilers, I lost them all. And there was a guy sitting next to me who was this Lubbock, Texas guy. He was like teaching me the ropes and like, hey, how about you spin my chip? Touch it for good luck. It was like, okay, dude.
People are so superstitious.
I think this is an accurate representation.
It really is an accurate representation of like a casino sleaze for sure.
Well, I also wanted to bring up too, when conventions were still a thing, a big Star Trek one is Star Trek Las Vegas. And so people just descend on the city of Las Vegas and everybody's like in uniform from different eras and their alien makeup and stuff like that. And you'll walk through that whole weekend and see this scene playing out.
And those people are at the same time like, oh my God, we're playing out season 2, episode 12.
Right. And meanwhile, the guy from Texas just like these foreigners.
And they're like, yes, call us foreign investors. If you
Everybody thinks they're Data and they're going to beat the house too, and none of them do.
No.
You just squish the dice into being properly weighted to land on 11 and you're good.
There you go.
So we get inside, we find this B-level casino, and there's oddly no life signs there. So it is some type of like simulation, but not. It's tangible. People are there. They can feel a wall. So they start looking they check in at the front. What's that?
They can't shoot through said wall. Phasers don't work here.
That was the most like Like Worf is supposed to be kind of the blunt instrument in a lot of these scenes, but that was the silliest justification of Worf finding an exit, where he went up to a load-bearing wall. He's like, and just starts pushing it. Like, you don't push a wall, Worf. You've never done that. What is going on? I was like, is he going to find a secret? And I was like, no, that's just a wall. That's the culmination of this. And then he's going to shoot it and wood won't disintegrate. Okay. It's a good use of our time.
Well, I think the assumption is that it's a hologram because that's what they've encountered in the past. But even hard light would simulate a wall, Worf. I don't know what the goal was.
Yeah. What's the plan here? Oh, I'm going to just tip it in.
Can we talk about how messed up it is in general? Not necessarily related to this episode, but that there's no windows in casinos, so you don't know when you spend entire days in there.
That's exactly why, is they don't want you to consider. There's no clocks. They don't want you to consider how long you've been in there, for sure. And they play music all the time, and it's really well lit. That was a job where I think I had to work like 12-hour shifts or like 10-hour shifts. And like,
don't notice shifts changing.
I've gotten really lucky in that, like, I don't really have fun gambling with those type of games. But if I am forced to go to a casino with friends or whatever, I will sit at the penny slots and drink the free drinks and just do that the whole time and talk to the waitresses.
I think it's such a slippery slope because you can intellectually understand that this is set up to psychologically hit on parts of my brain that are going to make me want to do it over and over. And it's statistically set up that I will lose. And yet.
That's part of it. It's cyclical.
And yet we're still on social media and it's set up the exact same way. Bam!
Thank you for the serotonin.
And click the notification anyway for this podcast. Don't do it. Stop watching. Don't listen. Turn it off. Go outside. Look at trees. Just look at them.
Come back.
Yeah, we went out of business because Becca kept discouraging people from watching our content.
Sorry.
We called it the Royale of a move. But anyway, foreign investors came in and took over. So we go to the front desk, we check in, and we get a very melodramatic scene with the bellboy. And for like the first 30 seconds, I was like, "What is happening? This episode can't be this bad." And then I was like, "Oh, that's part of what's going on. Is that it's so silly and so ham-handed that okay, I get it." But I for a minute was like, I am hating this episode with everything that passed.
But I love Rita, and Mickey D can't stop me. He doesn't know what a woman wants.
McDonald's has been around for 30 years at this point, but like no one calls it Mickey D's. But like I couldn't help but think that like Ronald McDonald was going to show up later in this episode.
This is the turning point where people started calling it Mickey D's.
This was it. This is culture being written.
The bellboy's in love with Mickey D's girlfriend. Is that right?
Rita is her own woman.
Oh, right.
Well, but for some reason they're fighting over her. Like, are they both interested in her? Like, I can't remember. Actually, do we even see Rita?
I don't know.
We never meet Rita.
Yeah, Rita is talked about but never shown.
Tell, don't show.
Right?
The writers, Todd Matthews.
Tell, don't show. Methane is pig farts. Tell, don't show.
Right.
2 Post-it notes on Becca's wall.
My wall of ideas.
Let me consult my notes.
It's true.
So honestly, like the reason I'm having trouble recapping this is because we just spend so long wandering around in here. Like we meet these characters. The Texan is a sleaze. The woman that he's seducing apparently has a husband that she's squandering his fortune. They do tell and not show us that, right?
I think so. I don't know.
And then like pretty much just keep asking for help. Like what a weird.
David gets a life sign on his tricorder, and he's like, "Oh, there's a human. We must go upwards." And so my favorite line is when they're going to the elevator and they push the button and it doesn't immediately open, and Worf is like, "It must be malfunctioning."
It's like they don't understand what past technology is. It's like if we got on a right. Yeah. It's like if we got on a wagon right now, we're like, "Where's the ignition?"
Right.
Right.
I don't understand how to turn this thing on.
Also, Data, you could have mentioned with your life sign reader on your tricorder that he was 200 years dead and had no heartbeat.
He said it was a trace of human DNA. And I was like, wait, you're in a hotel casino? Do not go look at the DNA in the hotel casino.
DNA. No, you're going to need a black light in these hotel rooms.
Oh, they have the tricorder. It has that setting.
Yeah,
I hope it just does have a black light, but not like a sensor, just so much as an actual black light.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if they used that on set for an effect.
But they do find a hotel room, and it has a really old corpse that nobody cleaned up. They just put underneath the sheet in the bed.
Classic Vegas.
Well, the author of the book didn't write about the housekeeping staff, therefore the aliens don't know to recreate them.
Right. And what happens in Vegas never gets interned in Vegas. That's where we find his spacesuit hanging up in the closet.
Yeah.
Did he decide to die naked in his bed?
I guess so. Like, did he just go to sleep and die? Is that what he said? Like, he's like, I'm going to go rest. And the characters are so cliche. This will be like a welcome embrace or something like that.
Well, yeah. This is a terrifying idea, though. There's something about it that is a kernel of a really cool idea, because he writes in his diary that
a kernel of a really good idea.
Yeah, because an alien life form found this U.S. spaceship in year 2037, and it accidentally destroyed everyone on the ship.
Oops.
Besides him. Heavy-handed.
Bad.
So they were like, "Ooh, well, what do we do with this guy? Let's put him in a prison of this one piece of material, reading material we found on their ship, which is this cheesy novel, Hotel Royale." And then they recreate it, which is kind of like the Jean-Paul Sartre play No Exit. It's like a hell where you're reliving
There we go.
characters over and over. It's like the definition of purgatory. And
like Waiting for Godot.
Yeah. Really interesting concept, buried deep within.
Very poor execution.
It's similar to, it reminds me of Space Odyssey, right? So
Sure.
in 2001 at the very end, spoiler if you haven't seen it in 40 years, Dave the astronaut is in like this very human-like environment. That's because the aliens have tried to recreate something familiar to him, and so that's their apology. The aliens' apology for making this virus that killed the Colonel's crewman is just like, well, you get to live in this bad novel now.
Yeah. Well, I don't blame my benefactors, but they are torturing me for all eternity.
Right.
These characters are so cliche, I want to kill myself is what came out of that diary entry.
Yeah.
But to be fair, like if we were to flip it and have it be the Enterprise as the entity coming across an alien life form that was alone, struggling, and you only had like a few clues, I could see them creating something like this. Like, okay, let's look at the interior of their ship. Let's look at any clues that we have to create a safe environment for this alien life form that we know nothing about. And what else can we do?
The story, actually, I kind of like the idea of what this story is, which is that astronaut gets lost in space, his crew dies from an alien virus, the alien feels bad and creates a purgatory for him to live in that it thinks is cool but truly isn't. I'd kind of want to see a little bit of what this guy had to go through that was so torturous. The characters were cliche and annoying, but then the viewer just gets to sit through cliche and annoying as opposed to like an adventure of some sort, or like the cliche being a problem.
I think what you're hitting on is how we would remake this episode. I think we would start back in the year 2037 and we would see this character trapped in this thing, and then we'd find our protagonist discovering his body. But everything we find interesting about this episode is read to us in a journal entry.
Yeah, and I don't think Star Trek ever like goes back in time. They always kind of stay in the 24th century. I mean, unless they're time traveling, obviously.
Yeah.
But like, I wonder if like it isn't better to have him like alive and acting different than everybody else in the environment. Like everybody's clearly cliche and corny and ham-handed, right? But then there's this lunatic old man who's running around trying to stop it all and get out, and they like chase him. Yeah, like then we have a mystery that we really want to solve, as opposed to just like wandering around and asking the hotel manager questions. Like,
then it's like Jumanji 2.
Well,
help me, get me out of here! Oh wow, this is Jumanji.
Kind of. Well, that's the thing is
you have to play the game, finish the game, and you're free.
Yeah, they did. They made $12 million. But the one thing that we're missing in, and what everybody will be missing going forward, is the novelty of them appearing in our era for this. Because if you take it into the context of this airing in like 89, 90, them appearing in this casino is very much seeing what you would see in a casino of the time. So for us, it's looking back at like what it was like at the late 80s and the 90s. It's just another time period, like the 60s or going to the 20s or whatever. But the novelty of it being right here and now, and seeing those characters, especially at the time when, you know, conventions were such a niche thing and you didn't really see characters interacting with, you know, going to McDonald's or whatever.
Why did McDonald's be the forefront of your mind? I can't imagine why.
D?
What if this was secretly sponsored by McDonald's? They didn't tell anybody.
Subliminally.
Well, then are they saying when they made this episode that this time period is representing the 90s because it was an old book sitting on the ship, or they could have made it represent theoretically 2037 when the astronaut left Earth?
Right.
It feels like it's like a 60s, 70s type story, but then they just put them in 80s kind of clothing. Like the whole Mickey D killing the busboy, or the busboy was not a busboy. Bellboy, thank you. Killing the bellboy in the lobby with a gun, like just in the middle of everything. And I know the story's supposed to be bad, so whatever. But like that felt very 1940s even. Like there's a bunch of different like kind of period games being played here, I feel.
That's maybe too much credit too. It's just, I said whatever.
That's probably true.
When the story's bad, how about we phaser slice time and space and create a vacuum that y'all can step through. You will cryogenically freeze and technically die because you'll have 12 seconds to get back on the ship in your cryogenically frozen form, and then the doctor can defrost you. Does that sound good?
You'll get better.
Was that Pulaski's entire contribution to this whole episode, which was that they'll bring into the conference room? She's like, well, we could do this, but you'll have 12 seconds to freeze to death.
Damn it, Jake.
Ada said 12 seconds. She just said, yes, it's
That's true. Jake, she is a doctor, not a physicist, okay?
I am not.
She's doing the best that she can.
I'm not slamming her. I'm slamming her lack of participation in this whole thing.
She gave the medical...
I feel bad for Picard and Troy this whole episode too, because Picard is just...
They had to read the book.
They were the Greek chorus in a way, or like the audience reacting to this weird play happening.
Were they? Because they couldn't see anything and they just kept asking questions. They became the Greek chorus, I guess, kind of at the end when they could tell them what was going on based on the story they read. But like everything else was just Picard being like, so what's happening? So what's going on now? Have we heard from them?
Yeah.
Jordy, what does this say? How much ammonia?
Had a B-plot.
Oh
and
my
the
gosh.
B-plot was Rita and Mickey D and the bellboy.
Yeah, like it just still wasn't interesting. Like that's the whole thing about even the solution to this, which is what Riker figured out, which is, well, we just need to take the role of what this is. They don't really get into anything. It just happens around them. And in the end, we do like some dice rolls and it's okay, it's fun. We won $12 million and we'll just buy the casino, which is also kind of sad. Like that casino just got cleaned out.
How does a business transaction work in this time?
Who knows?
Sir, we don't have enough money to pay you out. Great, then we buy you. It is bought now. It's like Trump claiming.
Again, it's like the book is so bad they can excuse it, right? So it's like it gives us license to just clean this episode up real nicely.
Oh man. Oh, but hold on. We have to be true. It's like you can't deviate from the timeline when you time travel. When you go into a novel plot, you have to be true to the characters as they were written. And these foreign investors were flamboyantly generous. Make it so.
And so Riker's like, I gotta get it everywhere. I gotta spread all this money.
Horny on Maine.
There it is. Okay.
There it is. That is Steve. Hey, I like that. To close the deal, he says, consider it a done deal. And then they walk out.
And that's it.
Business done.
Yeah.
I liked parts of what this episode was trying to do. Picard's reaction to reading A Dark and Stormy Night was hilarious. It physically pained him to say those words out loud. Like Patrick Stewart is so good at still like delivering despite not really having much to do.
True.
Great.
Yeah, and this is another like sort of exploration because in Next Gen, the holodeck as a concept is still a relatively new thing for the writers. And in original series, there was like a gangster 1920s episode, but they excused it as a whole planet evolved around like the 1920s gangster culture of Earth. And this was okay. Well, it wasn't a whole planet, but it was aliens that tried to do something, and this is making that bubble of using those set in costumes. I think once we get into the rhythm of like, okay, the holodeck is the place to do this, then they get better at like what stories can we tell within the framework of these amazing sets and somewhat extras.
Yeah. It's hard to say the rules are this is bad and then make something good.
Yeah.
Hey, you guys remember when Data is at the craps table and baby needs a new pair of shoes? He has these physical mannerisms that make me want to marry Brent Spiner. It's like, okay, now I'm in gambler mode. And he like flicks his wrist, cocks his head, winks, and throws the dice in such a mechanical and sexy way. You know what I'm talking about? It was great. Worth rewatching just that clip. I'm gonna make a GIF. No, I'm not.
I feel like if like RPG shows were popularized back then, like Brent Spiner would have been an all-star because he is like the ultimate role player as Data, because Data gets to take so many experiences that he's trying to recreate into the human lifestyle that he just gets so into it. And Brent Spiner like does it every time. It's so fun.
I'm having deja vu because I think I already told you this, but you know that Brent Spiner was a guest on Amy Vorpal's RPG show on Felicia Day's channel.
Yeah.
And okay, I did tell you this. And he said, I'm nervous. I've never role played before.
Incredible.
He was like, what are you talking about?
I did a similar thing with Curtis Armstrong, and he also had never played D&D before, and so we sat down, and once we started playing, he was like, oh, this is improv. And it's like, oh, yeah.
I mean, Xander, you and I worked on Relics and Rarities, and most of the celebrity guests on there were always just like, I don't know what I'm doing, so please. And we were like, you're going to have a great time, and they all did, and it was just
every
like,
time.
relax and just go along with it.
There's like
it's
the
funny
moment.
How intimidating it is, right?
Yeah.
Be in character. Go.
Yeah. Like these people have been acting all their career. All I gotta do is just do it with not a costume on. It's pretty simple.
Right. Oh, also I did have in my notes, we glossed over it, but O'Brien did make an appearance. Just wanted to say.
Yeah. Why?
I don't know.
There was some interesting, also in my notes, there was some interesting math in this episode because I think Data gives some bad gambling advice. The one that I noticed, or the one that I didn't notice that the Wikimote mentioned was that he told the woman to stay on like a, was it like a 13 or something? And like the better is to hit. But then also Riker and he were at the craps table. And this one I know definitely from being a D&D player. And Riker says, you know, the chances of getting a 7 are no better than getting a 6. I was like, that's absolutely not true. 7's the most common number in 2d6. We all know that from, you know,
Monte Carlo.
Exactly.
In a game where you roll 2 dice.
Trained.
D6s. Did you guys notice that the bellboy, when he was shot, had no wound or blood of any kind? I think the bellboy suit was a rental.
I feel like Star Trek wants to be very careful with its violence, and like where they disintegrated people last season, and actually they disintegrated what's his face's Reva's chorus in this episode too.
Right.
Season 2. I feel like they kind of want to still make it somewhat of a family show, so like a bullet wound might be a little much, but I'm not sure because what happened because it wasn't Crusher or somebody shot in the last time we had like
the gangster.
Yeah, someone was shot in that, wasn't that? I don't remember there being blood in that either.
Yeah, it was. I think it was Crusher because or like it grazed her or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like I noticed that too. Of like they kind of want to stray away from like too graphic of violence, but they still will do it.
Right.
That's the funny thing about violence in the 80s and 90s. It's like, well, we don't want to show violence, but anyway, here's a guy shooting another guy.
Right.
Like,
yeah,
okay.
That's the thing with violence is never taken as seriously as sex is in any context in our rating in America.
If you're going to show violence, then you need to show the consequences of violence, right? Because if you show violence without consequences, it gives people the idea that it doesn't have the same consequence, right?
Deep, too deep for this episode.
Too deep for this episode.
I'm trying to decide which political thing to equate this with, but there's just too many, so I can't, and my brain's exploding.
Okay, that just canceled itself out. Well, this episode was fine. I really disliked it in terms of its placement in this season, and I would just prefer it got removed.
I am going to run it as a Call of Cthulhu scenario.
I will say
it's a good scenario.
It is a good role-playing game scenario. It's a good one-shot of like they have to figure out what's going on and play along with the plot. It is definitely a good idea for like a DM who needs something to do. Of just like, I'm just going to put all these wacky characters in a casino and they got to figure out how to get out because there's no exit. And the way to get out is to buy the casino.
Hashtag no exit.
Yeah, it definitely.
Estelle.
How many hashtags are we going to have in this description?
Oh, boy.
I don't know, but I played Estelle in my a production I put on while in college. It wasn't a college production. Yeah, and
like
our venue had no air conditioning in the middle of summer in Kansas City, so it was like 112 degrees inside. It's hell. Hell is other people sitting next to you in a hot room.
Hell is the Royale. I just hope See, the astronaut in 2037 took this book with them on the shuttlecraft, and it's just like, why did this book get brought? You guys are astrophysicists. Bring something different. Yeah. And it makes me wonder if any astronauts are out exploring deep space, and sometimes they take archives of like relics from Earth. So maybe they take an episode of the Next Generation, and if they take this one, or to boldly watch, but if they take this episode and then aliens recreate this episode of TNG,
like stuck in a time loop.
Speaking of time loops, our next episode next week is Time Squared. That's right. The Enterprise discovers a duplicate of Picard from 6 hours in the future.
Engage.
Engage. But I'm going to say the engage 6 hours in the future, and then I'll edit it back in.
We'll come back.
Oh, that makes sense.
All right, this is future Jake saying engage.
Okay, bye.
Bye.